Welcome to Tavern Archery, where after a day in the archery field, we come into the tavern, grab a pint, sit down, and talk about all things target archery. Prost. We're back in the tavern today with Naran Noyon of the Barony of Ponte Alto. Welcome, Noyon.
Thank you.
Last time in the tavern, we sat down and talked about various Asiatic bows. I'd like to spend a few moments in talking about period shoots and competitions in the SCA.
I'd be delighted to talk about period archery competitions in the SCA because I've been working on that for a number of years.
Could you spend a few moments and share with us what is the criteria for a period shoot?
You know, the rules for equipment actually have been codified in the SCA Target Archery Handbook. And so you have to follow those. The different kingdoms can actually require more stringent guidelines if they wish. And the architect of a shoot may actually be as stringent as they want. Now, if you get to the point where you say that you have to have natural material bows and no fiberglass, you're probably not going to have that many archers show up. When we say period, the basic rules for that means no pistol grips, as in no modern bows, no takedowns. Now, if you have a takedown period bow that, the handle is in two pieces and you slot it together and you can't tell that it's not a single piece bow, that's a different story. Okay, so those are the big things. And then the arrows or the bolts, well, the bolts really aren't much different than what people regularly use for crossbows in the SCA anyway, because they're just bolts with feathers. For arrows, of course, they have to be natural material like wood or bamboo. And for the most part, we use steel tips. Some targets you might be allowed to use bodkins and stuff like that. Some of the specialized targets that we provide, where you need, or in my case, I often provide them rubber blunted arrows and flu arrows. So if you can come, make yourself a set of those, that's great. Check with the architect of the shoot, see what they say. They may say, like me, yeah, for this target, I actually have a set of arrows and even a bow that I need you to use. But for the most part, you want regular field points and probably a couple of rubber blunts. I would also say is that depending on the shoot and the architect, they may require period garb to go with it that matches the kit. So if your persona is Mongolian, then you're going to need to have a Mongolian style bow, and your garb and the archery equipment will need to match. And again, it depends on the architect and how big the event is, and whether they're just trying to get period bows in there and get people using them. Or for instance, at Penzik, the absolute rule is that your garb and your archery equipment have to coordinate.
Noyon, how do period shoots or competitions differ?
Period shoots, we try as much as possible to find period, documentable period targets. And we'll go over some of the ones that I have tended to use. Every culture has done something in the past. And I've combined, I've included in my shoots, I've usually included stuff from Europe, stuff from Asia. Now, do I have a little bias toward Asian stuff? Sure. Some of the targets are a lot of fun. Some of them are sort of variants from the Western stuff. For instance, the kabak, which you'll see a picture of later, which is the elevated, or it's basically a target on a pole And in order to make it safe for SCA shooting, I had to, to do some modifications, because the original was 40 or 50 feet high and shot on horseback at a gallop as you rode by underneath it. And then you had to aim practically straight up. And that was shot with, with sharp arrows. And, when you miss, that arrow is coming down somewhere. So what I did is take a brass 8-inch cymbal and stick it on the top. And I used a collapsible 30-foot flagpole with ropes and stakes. And then I actually added about 8 more feet. So the whole thing is about 38 feet high. And you're standing at the bottom. And in order to make the arrows safe, I use 6 vane flus like this. Okay. And rubber blunts on the other end. And everybody has to use the same bow, which is only 30 pounds. So when you miss, the arrows are generally going out in the field only about 20 yards. So you're not spending a long time going to collect them. And if you hit the cymbal and it comes back down, it's lost a whole lot of its force, and it usually lands away from you. But we still have to, we stand about 8 feet out from the pole. So, because we don't, we don't want anybody getting hit or anything like that. But also limiting the firepower of the bow makes a difference, because if somebody, picks up their, 60-pound or 100-pound crossbow and shoots a bolt at it and puts it through the cymbal, then you've kind of destroyed the target. And so mostly for the kabak now, and the kabak is kind of similar to the European popinjay, which is usually birds of some kind atop a pole or stuck on a pole sticking out of a tower window or something like that. So again, you're shooting up in the air, and so I have a version of that with birds on the top, and you're again shooting with the blunt arrows and the flus. So that approximates, or whatever, the old style target of those 2 different cultures. Then there's a Manchu/Mongolian tunkan, which is the round sandwiched, I guess, or nestled rings that are pushed together, and they're just held there by the fit. And that's pretty much like shooting a regular, like a royal round target, except that you're shooting again with blunts, and you're trying to knock out the middle, you're trying to knock out the center. So if you do that, then that's the highest score and you're done. But that also requires blunt arrows, preferably not with flus, because the flu feathers are bigger, and they might actually carry out the second ring, and then you could only get scored for the second ring rather than the first one. The other targets that we use include the Turkish puta, which is the sort of gourd-shaped target. That was shot traditionally at 165 meters, about, something like that. And there are various theories as to what it represents, but it's kind of shaped like the front, the head-on image that you'd get of a rider and a horse, because it narrows at the top. And that had bells on the bottom, which if you hit it right, you'll ring the bells. That is shot with sharp arrows with, field points. We do wands, which was an English thing or a continental thing. And that you can just take cheap pieces of wood. What I do, I just go to Home Depot and get a bunch, and I get maybe some 2-inch ones, 2-inch thick or 2-inch wide, like slats, and maybe 1.5 and maybe 1. So the smaller the smaller the surface area, the harder they are to hit. But basically, I'll just take a chop saw or whatever, saw, and cut them at an angle in the bottom so that I can just push them into the ground. All right, that you can set up at whatever distance you want. So again, period shoots, number one, we're getting people to do what the ancients did for fun. But you also have to, just like any other shoot, you have to structure it so that everybody can at least in theory, hit something. Because you don't want people going home and said that shoot was horrible because I didn't hit anything. But so wands, you can set it whatever distance you think is appropriate. And if one has never set up a shoot like that, then get some experienced archers to say, well, I can hit that at 20 yards, but nobody else that's going to show up that I know of probably can. So you might want to move some closer and then have some farther out for more of a challenge. I usually set up half a dozen of those at different distances. Wreaths, woven like a holiday wreath or whatever out of vines were a thing. And I just actually go to Michael's or a craft store and get the pre-woven ones, and they come in a couple different sizes, and you put those up on the target. So you may have a very small one, and then maybe one this size and one that size. And the game there is to put the arrow inside the wreath and not into the wreath. Okay. Now, scoring wise, all these things are kind of up to the architect of the shoot. The puta target, there are 2 medallions on it. One is toward the bottom in the middle, and it's much larger. And the top one is smaller and has sort of a tongue sticking down. And then a bunch of little circles all around. And even the Turks today don't know exactly what the scoring was supposed to be. So that's a little arbitrary. Most people I know, what I've done is to have 3 points for anywhere inside the large medallion and 5 points for the one at the top, which is harder because it's smaller. Plus, as the target has narrowed up toward the top, you're more likely to miss the entire thing because your background on the part you're trying to hit is smaller. So I usually do 1 point for hitting any part of the puta, 3 points for the large medallion, and 5 points for the small one, including the tongue that comes down. We usually will do a period royal round target, and that is also a 60 centimeter, and it's based on the Luttrell Salter targets, which have whatever, I think it's 4 centimeters, something like that. There's a gold, which is about half the size of our regular gold for a royal round target, and that's 8 points. And then there's a green section outside of that, which is 4 points, and then there's a white section outside of that, which is 2 points. So those we will do timed rounds on that. We'll do regular. We might try to set it up at 20, 30, and 40. We might set it farther back. We might set it a little closer. But, again, whoever's running the shoot gets to decide how they want to, set those things up. And the scoring on that, so yeah, it's 8, 4, and 2. And we usually will shoot an end of 6 arrows at it. All right, so clouds are done pretty much the way any cloud is done. Again, it's at the discretion of the marshal in charge or the architect. I used to paint it up, make it 4x8, et cetera, and then I realized that for a period shoot, don't even need to do that. So what I do, and based on various things, but basically I will just get myself a portable hole and a pole and another sideways stick and a big piece of canvas and sort of make a sail. And that's your ground zero. And then what I do actually is I don't even bother to make out to do like 3 concentric circles or whatever. And so the game there is you just get as close to the pole as you can. And again, the architect or whoever, the marshal gets to decide how far, you're shooting from. But when you get up there, then usually it's me. I bring my bow and I measure one bow length from the pole around in a circle, and whoever's arrows are in there get the 5-pointers. 2 bow lengths gets the 3-pointers, and 3 bow lengths gets the 1-pointers. So that's how I score that. Now, if you irritate me, I'm bringing the Turkish bow, you know, the one about this big. So that's a sort of standard clout. And then, you know, people also do roving, and roving was particularly done in England. And that's, you know, you may pick something at a, you know, whoever, you know, you might just pick a point, and you may have set these up, you know, beforehand, you know, and say, okay, we're going to shoot at this one over here. And you're not told the distance. And usually in SCA archery, we never tell people what the distance of a target is, because they need to be able to just guess and you know, accommodate for it. Because the granted royal rounds, you know, we always shoot them 20, 30, 40 yards. So, you know, things that are farther and in between, that should be part of your training anyway. But roving clouts, so at Pemsic, for instance, I will put the pole someplace in the middle, and I'll start everybody shooting off from one end, and you know, maybe it's 80 yards. I don't know. I don't even mark it. And then we go up and measure, and then walk off in another direction. So your whole perspective is different. And maybe, you know, do it again maybe 2 or 3 times. But again, I will be measuring. And the other thing I have done, and you can do, is take a knotted rope. You know, take a 10-foot section of rope, knot it in, or a 9-foot section, you know, whatever you want to do. So knot it, you know, make 3 knots in it, and you measure, you know, to the first knot is the 5 points, the second knot is the 3 points, and the third knot is the 1 point. Now, I was looking at, the Tibetans have apparently a very old target, supposedly 1,100 years old, which they use today, which is it's like a triangle, and it's, you know, you can basically mark it off however you want, but it's, apparently it was about 80 centimeters high and about 70 centimeters wide at the base. And now when we have done it here, we've marked it off kind of like a standard target with the standard colors and the gold at the top. But the top, you know, at the pinnacle, at the point at the top, you know, your space is pretty thin. And if you're going to go for that, it's you know, it's go big or go home. Because if you aim too high or whatever, then you're going to miss entirely. And then we get to flight shooting, which, if the event has sufficient room to do a flight shoot and you have the time to do it, that's great. But a lot of places you go and you know, you're lucky if you have the room to do a 100-yard clout. Flight shooting could be a whole nother discussion, but basically you're going shooting as far as you can. And usually you get, you know, 6 arrows. Again, it's up to the architect, and you're trying to get that arrow to go as far as you possibly can. Now, if you've done your research and you've been working on flight shooting and everything, then you show up with properly made, or at least reasonably engineered, flight arrows that are as light as you can get them and maybe as short as you can get them safely. And maybe you've done like I do and put the little parchment veins on there, and that, you know, that does, if you've done it right, that does pay off. Then you add up all the points and pass out the prizes.
Thank you, Noyon. There are a lot of different options in setting up a period competition.
I would say if your average shoot, again, depending on the space, the other thing is time, okay? Because some of these targets are basically, by their nature, they're a bottleneck because only one person can shoot them at a time. Either because it's not safe for more than one to be shooting them, or because they have to be reset. Right. So, but for the kabak and the popinjay, I'm sure that some people use field points, but my feeling is, again, for safety, you want to use blunts. And the other thing is, blunts will not stick in the target up there, and you don't have to sit there and pull the target, the pole down to retrieve arrows and stuff. So I would say if you're doing a kabak or a popinjay with the birds, get people to, bring rubber blunts. And again, for some of the shoots, like the kabak, I actually provide everything they need.
Noyon, do period archers use the same archery ranking system?
Period archery in Atlanta for royal rounds is scored the same. The target's the same. We do have a different category. So make sure when you get your scores put in that it goes into the proper category for a period handbow.
Would I be able to find a period shooter competition when I'm at Penzic?
Yes, you will definitely find a period shoot at Penzic. It is now usually scheduled for Sunday of War Week. It's been going on since 2013, where we had 5 archers. Last year we had about 30. We absolutely welcome you. Remember that the requirements are that your garb and your archery kit do match for time, period, and culture. Within reason, we don't have a laurel at the gate saying, no, your bow is 10 years out of date, you can't come in. So the big thing is everybody has fun, and while there are prizes and stuff, there's a whole lot of camaraderie about doing the same thing.
I also want to see the different personas and the arrows and the bows, because it sounds like a perfect place to be able to see that from across all the lands and all the different period archers coming to compete at Penzic. Thanks for stopping by at the tavern today. It's been great sitting here chatting with you, and I appreciate everything that you do for the SCA, the Baronia Ponte Alto, and the Kingdom of Valantia. Pro.
Hurrah! Hurrah! Hurrah!
They long had shot so well, and no wonder, for truly they spent time gathered here. They spent time gathered here in tavern archery.